What would you do if your own sister called you a beggar in front of a dozen strangers? Would you walk away, shattered, or would you come back this time? Owning the building she tried to shame you in, I'm Natalie Mitchell, 32 years old, and the last month of my life turned everything upside down publicly, painfully, and poetically. But before we get to the moment that made me gasp for air in the middle of a marble-floored bank, I want to take you back. Because betrayal this deep doesn't begin with one insult, it grows over years, one subtle jab at a time. Rebecca and I grew up in the quiet suburbs of Chicago. We shared a bedroom, but not much else. She was 5 years older, effortlessly successful, and already adored by our parents by the time I started coloring outside the lines. While I taped my crayon sketches to the wall, Rebecca lined hers with awards, trophies, and certificates that shimmered under her meticulously angled desk lamp. She was the golden child. Period. Our mother used to say she was born for greatness, as if the rest of us were just placeholders in her spotlight. Why can't you be more like your sister wasn't just a question, it was the background music of my childhood. Rebecca was disciplined, brilliant, sharp like glass. She studied late woke early and earned the title of valedictorian. While I doodled my way through sketchbooks no one bothered flipping through. She went on to Northwestern University, studied finance, graduated summa cum laude, and landed a position at First National Bank right out of college. Not just any position, within 6 years, she became the youngest branch manager in the company's history, and she made sure everyone knew it. Me, I followed my heart straight into a field my parents never respected. I studied graphic design at a smaller state school, cobbling together scholarships and side jobs to make it through. My graduation barely got a photo in the family group chat. That same week, Rebecca was flying to New York to accept a Rising Star Award from the National Bankers Association. Mom didn't even pretend to remember the date. She's making connections, she told me over the phone. You're just getting a piece of paper for drawing pictures. I swallowed my disappointment and smiled through it. That's what I always did, smile through it. After college, I launched a small freelance design business, branding websites, small marketing campaigns for local businesses. It wasn't glamorous and it didn't pay well, but it was mine. I made it with my hands, my heart, my vision. But Rebecca never missed a chance to belittle it. Every Thanksgiving, every birthday, every family gathering, she'd lean in with that perfect smirk and ask, "Still doing those little drawings, Nat?" She'd offer, half joking, I could put in a word. The bank is hiring tellers, real job, real pay." Then she'd hand out gifts that cost more than my rent. Brag about her condo downtown. Ask me loudly if I was still in that artsy little neighborhood, the one with the peeling paint and leaky windows. Her insults were sugar-coated in faux concern. She wasn't just my sister, she was my personal humiliation artist. And our parents. They didn't even try to hide the favoritism. Rebecca managed their retirement accounts, their travel plans, even their passwords. At dinner, they hung on her every word. At my best, I was background noise. Still, I never hated her. I wanted to. I should have. But I didn't. There was always this small, aching part of me that hoped desperately that one day she'd see me. Not as the family disappointment, not as the failed artist, but as a sister, as an equal. That hope flickered briefly when I landed a job as creative director at a mid-sized marketing firm. It was the first time I felt like maybe, just maybe, I'd earned a seat at the adult table. The job came with a solid salary, benefits, even a corner desk. For 6 months, I felt steady, seen. But good things in my life rarely lasted long. When the company restructured, my position was the first to be cut. Budget priorities, they said, handing me a 2-month severance and a thank you card signed with pity. I tried not to panic, but the panic came anyway through my walls, my windows into my dreams. Freelance clients vanished, the economy shriveled, and my savings gone, spent on the software I needed for a job I no longer had. I stopped attending family dinners, avoided calls, made up excuses about looming deadlines and exciting projects that didn't exist, but avoidance only bought me silence, not support. One day, after a particularly cruel phone call from Mom Rebecca, always makes time for family and she works so much more than you, I cracked. I texted Rebecca asking to meet, not for money, just for comfort, maybe advice, maybe the smallest shred of sisterhood. She chose the most expensive cafe in the Loop, showed up in a custom pantsuit, ordered a $9 matcha latte, and barely looked at me. "This is what happens when you chase pipe dreams," she said. "Art's not a career, Nat, it's a hobby." She left me with the bill and more shame than I thought I could carry. Still, even then I hadn't reached bottom. That came a few days later, when I found myself standing in line at her bank clutching my ID, hoping to withdraw my last $99. That's where the real story begins. The moment when Rebecca didn't just ignore my struggle, she weaponized it. But she had no idea what I'd been keeping to myself. No one did. The morning it all came crashing down started like any other, too quiet, too cold, and too heavy. I woke up to a bright yellow eviction notice jammed under my apartment door. 3 days to pay or leave. No extensions. No mercy. I stared at it, heart pounding, the words bleeding into each other like they were written in a different language. I'd known it was coming. The rent check had bounced last week, but seeing it, holding that piece of paper, it felt like the universe stamping failure across my forehead. My fridge held half a carton of milk, a few wilted vegetables, and some old takeout condiment packets I'd been saving like treasure. I hadn't had a proper meal in days. Every dollar was sacred now, and I had exactly 99 of them left. $99. It wasn't just a number, it was my lifeline. I needed bus fare to interviews, a few printed portfolio pages for a freelance lead, and maybe a sandwich that didn't come from a dollar menu. But even then, I didn't want to ask for help. Not from my parents, not from friends, and definitely not from Rebecca. Still, the irony stung. I had to walk into the one place I'd avoided like the plague, my sister's bank. Not for a handout, just to get my own money. My last $99. I dressed like I was going to another interview, pulling on the same carefully preserved navy blue blazer I'd worn twice that week. It had been dry cleaned a month ago, back when I could still afford such luxuries, and I'd been babying it ever since. Professional outside, even if I was falling apart inside. I applied concealer like armor covering the exhaustion under my eyes, patting down my hair so the world wouldn't see how hollow I felt. First National Bank was a sleek skyscraper of glass and marble nestled in the heart of downtown Chicago. Rebecca had once given the family a tour when she became manager, pointing out the top-floor conference rooms like they were sacred halls she alone had earned access to. Now I was walking into that same lobby, my stomach twisted in knots, praying no one would recognize me. The place was pristine, polished. Classical music floated through the air. Plush chairs cradled clients scrolling through phones that probably cost more than I'd made the entire month. The red blinking of security cameras followed my every step like eyes whispering, "You don't belong here." But I had no choice. I joined the line, trying not to look like I was about to burst into tears. The woman ahead of me transferred thousands between accounts like she was ordering an iced coffee. The man behind me tapped his Rolex, clearly annoyed to be stuck behind someone like me. I could see Rebecca in her office, perched behind a sleek desk with chrome accents, gesturing confidently to her staff. She looked like everything I'd never been allowed to become: poised, respected, bulletproof. When the teller finally called, I stepped forward, forcing a small smile. "Good morning," I said, sliding over my ID and debit card. "I'd like to make a withdrawal, please." The young man's name tag read, Tyler. He looked fresh, out of college, neat, pleasant, and polished. He typed my info and smiled politely. "How much would you like to withdraw today, Ms. Mitchell?" I swallowed, my voice dropping. $99. His fingers hesitated over the keyboard. "Sorry, did you say 990? "No," I said, heat rising to my cheeks. "Just 99. He blinked, then glanced back at the screen. I saw the change in his eyes, a flicker of something pity, confusion. "One moment, please." He picked up the phone and whispered something I couldn't hear. When he hung up, he gave me a tight smile. "Someone will be with you shortly." I knew exactly what that meant. Seconds later, the office door opened and Rebecca stepped out, flawless as ever, in a charcoal blazer and red lipstick that matched the soles of her Louboutins. She exchanged a few quiet words with a colleague, then turned her gaze toward the teller line. Her eyes landed on me, and for just a breath, just a second, her expression cracked. Then, like always, it reassembled itself into perfection. She walked toward us with purpose. Everyone looked up. I could feel them watching. "Natalie," she said, smiling like she was greeting a stranger. "What a surprise." "Hello, Rebecca," I replied, trying not to shrink. "Is there a problem with my sister's transaction?" she asked Tyler, but her eyes never left mine. "She's trying to withdraw $99, he said, emphasizing the amount like it was beneath him." "Just 99, I repeated barely above a whisper. Rebecca's lips curled, eyebrows rising. I see she said tone honeyed and hollow. Then she turned to the teller. "And that will leave the account." "Empty," Tyler answered softly. Rebecca turned back to me, expression hardening beneath her smile. "I'm sorry, Natalie," she said, her voice suddenly carrying through the lobby, "but we don't normally process such minimal transactions at this branch. We serve business clients, high net worth individuals." My face burned. "It's my account," I said, trembling. "My money." "Of course," she said sweetly. Then louder. "But honestly, we don't serve beggars here. Perhaps the check cashing store down the street would be more appropriate for your financial situation." The room fell silent. Conversations stopped. Phones were lowered. Security guards subtly shifted positions. I felt like I was being dissected under a spotlight, humiliated, exposed. Tears stung the backs of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I picked up my ID, my debit card, and somehow forced words past the lump in my throat. "Thank you for your time," I said, my voice scraping like gravel. "That'll be all." As I turned to leave, Rebecca called after me. "Let me know if you need financial advice, Nat. Clearly you could use it." A few people chuckled. Quiet, cruel laughter. I didn't stop walking. Couldn't. I pushed through the revolving doors and into the biting Chicago wind head down heart-shattered. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't even the insult. It was knowing that the one person who should have protected me chose to break me instead. I barely made it to my car. My beat-up Honda parked 3 blocks away to avoid the parking garage fee before the tears came. I sobbed until my lungs ached, until I had nothing left to give. And then my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Rebecca said you came by the bank today. Everything okay?" Of course. Of course Rebecca had already called her. Of course she was controlling the story. I stared at the screen for a long time, then shut it off. But the moment I did, I remembered something. The envelope. The letter I'd received just 3 days earlier. The one I'd been too overwhelmed to believe. The one that if it was real would change everything. Sitting in my old car, breath fogging the windshield cheeks, stained with tears, I reached into the glove box and pulled out the thick, cream-colored envelope I'd tucked away days earlier. I had almost forgotten it buried beneath overdue bills, rejection emails, and spiraling fear. The return address read, Harrington Wells and Associates, Attorneys at Law. I had signed for it on Friday. A delivery guy had shown up at my door with that official envelope asking for a signature like it was a pizza order. I'd assumed honestly that it was some kind of collection notice, or worse, a lawsuit. But when I opened it that night, what I found felt less like a legal summons and more like a fairy tale. Dear Miss Natalie Mitchell, we are pleased to inform you that under the last will and testament of Mr. Theodore James Mitchell, you have been named the sole beneficiary of his estate. I remember blinking, rereading the name again and again. Theodore James Mitchell. Grandpa Ted. A man I'd met maybe 3 times in my entire life. My father's estranged dad. The ghost at the edge of every family story. The one they never talked about without some twinge of judgment or shame. Dad used to say he threw his life away on a pipe dream, whatever that meant. But apparently, that pipe dream paid off. According to the letter, Grandpa Ted had started a tech company late in life. a little-known firm that just months ago had been acquired by a major Silicon Valley giant. His stock options worth $2.8 billion, and he'd left it all to me. Not to his son, not to the golden granddaughter who worked in finance, to me, the struggling artist, the black sheep, the disappointment. I laughed when I first read it, out loud, borderline hysterical. I thought maybe it was a scam. Maybe someone was playing a cruel joke. But then I read the rest of the letter. The details were too specific to be fake. It mentioned things only Grandpa Ted would know, like the wooden blocks he carved for me on my 5th birthday, the way I used to sit on his lap and draw while he worked in his study. And it came with contact info, a direct number to a senior partner, Malcolm Harrington. I called, expecting a disconnected line. Instead, Malcolm picked up on the second ring. "Miss Mitchell," he said in a calm, confident voice, "we've been trying to locate you. Your grandfather left very clear instructions. He wanted you to be given everything, including a letter." That afternoon, I met Malcolm in his high-rise downtown office. Leather chairs, glass walls, espresso machine in the corner. He didn't treat me like a struggling artist. He treated me like an heiress, because I was one. Stock portfolios, property deeds, trust accounts, all being transferred to my name. The paperwork was nearly complete. The inheritance would be finalized within 72 hours. I sat there stunned, barely processing words like liquid assets and international holdings. But the moment that really broke me was the letter. Malcolm slid it across the table in a sealed envelope, Grandpa's handwriting on the front. "For Natalie, read in private." That night, back in my freezing apartment, I lit a candle and opened it. "Dear Natalie, you won't remember this, but when you were 6 years old, you showed me a drawing. Your parents dismissed it and your sister mocked it. But I saw something they didn't. I saw joy. Raw, unfiltered creativity. I started my company based on an idea everyone laughed at. They said I was too old, too idealistic, but I believed in the beauty of building something from nothing. I see that same spark in you. Your father, my son, never forgave me for choosing a different path. And Rebecca. She's brilliant with numbers, no doubt, but she's blind to imagination. She'll be fine. She'll always be fine. But you, Natalie, you deserve to create without constraint. Use this gift wisely, not because you need it more, but because you'll do more interesting things with it. Your Grandpa Ted. I read it again, and again, until the tears blurred the ink and my breath shook. He saw me. When no one else did, he remembered me. He chose me. And I had walked around for 3 days trying to scrape together $99, while $2.8 billion sat waiting for me. I hadn't told anyone. Not my parents, not Rebecca. I wanted to make sure everything was real, and if I'm honest, I needed time to process who I was about to become. My plan was simple: finalize everything, quietly transfer the funds into a new account at a different bank, and move on. But then, Rebecca happened. That moment in the bank, the way she looked at me like I was filth. The words, "We don't serve beggars here." I hadn't forgotten them. I couldn't. And suddenly, I didn't want to walk away quietly anymore. Maybe that sounds petty. Maybe it was petty. But something inside me cracked open. I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about respect, dignity. The years I'd been made to feel less than, worthless. Rebecca didn't just owe me an apology. She needed to see who I really was. I turned the key in the ignition, wiped my eyes, and made a decision. The next time I walked into that bank, I wasn't going to be the girl with $99 in her account. I was going to be the woman with everything. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because I couldn't stop replaying her words in my head. "We don't serve beggars here." The phrase echoed like a drumbeat, rhythmic and cruel. It wasn't just an insult, it was a verdict, one she had no right to deliver. But tomorrow I would return to the scene of that verdict, not as the desperate sister with $99 to her name. No, tomorrow I would return as her equal, or rather, her superior. By morning I was ready. The suite my financial team had arranged for me at the Peninsula overlooked the Chicago skyline. Warm-toned marble floors, velvet armchairs, and a bathroom so luxurious it felt fictional. I stood before the mirror, brushing a final layer of mascara onto lashes that no longer trembled. The suit I chose was navy Chanel elegant, sharp and deliberate. Not flashy, but unmistakably powerful. I didn't want to look rich. I wanted to look like someone who couldn't be dismissed. I had bought it the day after my inheritance was confirmed. A splurge. Yes, but not for vanity. It was armor. The kind Rebecca wore every day until I forgot what she looked like underneath. I straightened the lapels, took one final breath, and whispered to my reflection, "It's time." The same Honda I'd cried in the day before waited in the hotel garage. I could have summoned a limo, could have walked into that bank with a motorcade, but I didn't want the world to see a stranger. I wanted Rebecca to recognize the girl she humiliated, the girl who now had the power to buy the very marble floor she'd been kicked down on. I pulled into the First National Bank garage, and this time, I didn't circle for street parking. I drove straight to the valet. The same attendant who had barely looked at me yesterday rushed to open my door. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, eyes catching the subtle shine of my heels. I smiled and tipped him generously. People can sense wealth, real wealth, not just from clothes, but from the way you carry silence like confidence and stillness, like a crown. The revolving doors greeted me again, their brass edges gleaming. The lobby hadn't changed, same soft lighting, same instrumental soundtrack. But I had. This time, I walked straight past the teller line, straight to the customer service desk. "Good morning," I said, placing my new leather card holder on the desk with purpose. "I'd like to speak to Mr. Harold Thompson, please." The woman behind the desk, Diane, her nameplate read, blinked, startled. "Mr. Thompson is our bank president. Do you have an appointment?" "No," I replied calmly, "but please let him know that Natalie Mitchell is here to discuss a significant deposit and investment opportunity." She opened her mouth, paused, and then nodded politely. "Just one moment, please." As Diane picked up the phone, I saw her eyes flick to my card. Harrington Wells and Associates embossed in gold and widen ever so slightly. She murmured a few words into the receiver, paused, then glanced up at me with a new air of respect. "Mr. Thompson will see you right away. Would you like to use the executive conference room?" "That would be lovely," I replied. I didn't even need to request it, but I did anyway. "Oh, and one more thing. Please ask Rebecca Mitchell to join us. She's my sister, and I'd like her to be part of this discussion." Diane hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding again. "Of course. Right this way." The clicking of my heels across the marble felt louder than yesterday, more deliberate, more noticed. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Rebecca. She was in the middle of a conversation with a colleague, clipboard in hand, her face its usual blend of confidence and control, until she saw me. Her eyes did a double take, raking across my tailored suit, expensive heels, and the quiet authority in my posture. Her confusion was almost comical. She excused herself, hurrying over. "Natalie," she said, her tone sharp with disbelief. "What are you wearing?" Ms. Mitchell Diane cut in smoothly. "Your sister is here to meet with Mr. Thompson. He's expecting her in the executive conference room." Rebecca's face froze, then contorted into something between irritation and panic. "There must be a mistake," she snapped. "My sister doesn't have business with Mr. Thompson." I met her gaze unwavering. "No mistake, Rebecca. Mr. Thompson is expecting me. I've also requested your presence." Rebecca turned on Diane, her voice low and furious. "I'll handle this." "Please tell Mr. Thompson there's been a deeper voice interrupted her. "There's no misunderstanding." Mr. Harold Thompson had emerged from the elevator looking every bit the bank president's silver hair, tailored three-piece suit, and the aura of a man used to being obeyed. He walked straight toward me. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, extending his hand to me, not Rebecca. "I'm delighted to meet you. Malcolm Harrington gave me a courtesy call this morning. Please follow me." Rebecca's mouth parted, no words emerging. Before we stepped into the private elevator, Mr. Thompson turned back. "Rebecca," he added as an afterthought, "please join us. Your sister has specifically requested your presence." She followed us up in silence. In the executive conference room, floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the entire city. At the head of the mahogany table, Mr. Thompson gestured for me to sit. Rebecca took the seat across from me, visibly rattled. Mr. Thompson smiled. "Ms. Mitchell, I understand you'd like to discuss a significant financial matter." I opened my portfolio, pulling out the notarized documents. "Yes. 3 days ago, I received notification that I am the sole beneficiary of the estate of Theodore James Mitchell, founder and majority shareholder of Quantum Leap Technologies." Rebecca's face went ghostly pale at our grandfather's name. For those unfamiliar, I continued, "Quantum Leap was recently acquired for $4.3 billion. My share represents approximately 65% of that, along with real estate and personal assets. Total value $2.8 billion. I slid the documents across the table. "As you can see, everything has already been finalized." Rebecca looked like she'd swallowed glass. "That can't be real," she whispered. "Grandpa Ted was retired. He had nothing." "Apparently not," I said. "Apparently, he left it all to me." Mr. Thompson flipped through the paperwork, his eyebrows rising higher with each page. "These appear to be in order. But of course, we'll verify with Mr. Harrington's office." "Of course," I replied, sliding my phone across the table. "Malcolm is expecting your call." As he dialed, Rebecca sat stiffly, hands clenched in her lap, staring at me like I'd grown horns. She had no idea what was coming next. But when I said I had come to make a deposit, I wasn't talking about the billions. I came back for exactly $99. Mr. Thompson was still on the phone with Malcolm Harrington, verifying every detail. I sat quietly at the head of the table, calm, composed, my fingers lightly resting on the documents. Across from me, Rebecca was unraveling. Her shoulders stiffened with every confirmation she overheard. Yes. Completed transfer? Yes. Verified shares. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the armrest of her chair. This was the moment she realized I wasn't bluffing. This wasn't a stunt. I wasn't the broke little sister from yesterday. I was a billionaire. And I was sitting across from her not to gloat, but to show her finally who I was. Mr. Thompson hung up and turned to me with reverent enthusiasm. His tone had shifted entirely. "Everything checks out, Ms. Mitchell. Harrington confirmed the entire transfer. We'd be honored to support your financial management needs. In fact, I'll personally oversee your accounts." "Thank you," I said, meeting his gaze. "I'd like to start with 2 things: a full deposit of my inheritance into a new account under my name." He smiled, readying a notepad. "And second," I added, turning to Rebecca, "a withdrawal." He blinked. "Of course." What amount? I didn't look away. $99. The words echoed in the room like a pin dropped in church. Mr. Thompson glanced up from his notes, confused. "I'm sorry, did you say?" "$99, I repeated, my voice steady. "The exact amount I tried to withdraw yesterday when I was humiliated by your bank staff and told that this institution doesn't serve beggars." Mr. Thompson's head whipped around toward Rebecca. Her face had drained of color, her mouth slightly ajar. She stammered. "There was a misunderstanding. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize I was worth anything," I interrupted, calm but cold. "You thought I was still beneath you, and that gave you permission to treat me like trash." "Natalie," she said, her voice cracking, "I was wrong." Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow. "You said this happened in the main lobby in front of customers, staff, and at least a dozen customers," I replied. "She told me quite clearly that this bank doesn't serve beggars." Rebecca flinched. Her professional mask had shattered. Mr. Thompson's tone turned from courteous to clipped. "Rebecca, is that true?" She didn't speak. Her silence was answer enough. I turned back to him, gently pushing the authorization paperwork closer. "After withdrawing the $99, I'd like to arrange a second transaction, a transfer of a more substantial amount. Let's start with $1 billion. The room stopped breathing. $1 billion, he repeated, stunned. Yes, into the new account. We can discuss investment allocations afterward. Mr. Thompson jumped into action, already calling down to compliance officers, security, and his private assistant. He barked orders with the energy of a man watching his entire career pivot on a single client. Executives began arriving within minutes, regional directors, compliance managers, even the bank's legal counsel. Staff swarmed outside the conference room with documents, laptops, and espresso carts. Rebecca. She sat frozen. No longer the queen of the castle, now just a quiet figure on the sidelines of her own domain. At one point, Tyler, the same teller from yesterday, was summoned to verify my ID again. He couldn't look me in the eye. I answered every procedural question, signed every form with unshakable calm. All while Rebecca silently watched the sister she once dismissed as between projects redefine every metric of power she thought she understood. Finally, during a lull, she found her voice. "Natalie," she said softly as we sat alone for a moment while the executive stepped out, "I want to apologize." I said nothing. Not just for yesterday, for everything. She swallowed hard. Her voice trembled. "For the way I've treated you for years. I mocked you. I diminished you. I thought you were weak." Still, I stayed silent. But the truth is, I was the weak one. I've spent my whole life needing to feel superior because I was terrified that if I stopped performing, if I slipped even a little, I'd be nothing. Her eyes filled with tears. "And when you walked in yesterday, vulnerable, asking for $99, all I saw was what I feared becoming." She looked at me pleading now. "I'm so sorry." I looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time in years. Behind the confidence, the designer clothes, the flawless resume, I saw someone I'd never seen before, a scared girl in a woman's skin holding together her identity with trembling fingers. And for a brief moment, I felt pity, not weakness, but clarity. I said, "You could have helped me. You didn't need to give me money. You could have just offered kindness." She nodded. "I know." Suddenly, with a choked sob, Rebecca did the unthinkable. She slid from her chair, onto her knees, in front of me. "Please," she whispered, "don't ruin me." The room was still. Mr. Thompson and 2 other executives had just stepped back in and froze at the sight of her, the branch manager, kneeling. She didn't care. She kept her eyes on me. "I know I don't deserve your mercy, but I'm asking for it anyway." I looked down at her. Mascara ran down her cheeks. Her hands shook. And something inside me, something sharp and angry, began to loosen. Because right then I realized I didn't want revenge. Not really. I just wanted to be seen, to be treated with respect. The same respect I'd been denied my entire life by the people who claimed to love me. I took a breath. Then I stood up, walked over, and offered her my hand. "Get up, Rebecca." She hesitated, then took it. She rose, trembling. "Your job is safe," I said. "I made that a condition of my deposit." Her eyes widened. "You did. I don't want to destroy you," I said. "I just wanted you to see me." She wiped her face, trying to compose herself. "I do," she whispered. "For the first time, I really do." We stood there for a moment, 2 women who had spent a lifetime on opposite sides of a family portrait. And for the first time, we were just sisters, not a banker and a beggar, just Natalie and Rebecca. In the days that followed, the story spread like wildfire. An artist walks into a bank with $99. Days later, she deposits billions. The headlines were relentless. The bank beggar turned billionaire silent heiress, stuns Wall Street. Artist inherits tech empire and her sister's throne. My face appeared on financial blogs, lifestyle podcasts, and news channels I'd never watched before. People I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly in my inbox asking for lunch or a quick catch-up. But I kept my circle small. Because something unexpected happened after I walked out of that bank, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt exhausted. That moment, Rebecca on her knees, the $99 withdrawal, the billion-dollar transfer. It hadn't healed the wounds. It had just exposed how deep they went. So I paused. No yachts, no mansions, no headlines chased. Instead, I rented a modest, light-filled apartment in the city, one with white walls and tall windows, and just enough space for a proper art studio. It felt mine. Quiet, steady, peaceful. My financial team worked day and night building out the infrastructure to manage the estate, trusts, asset protection, security. But while they were setting up vaults, I was sketching something bigger. The Mitchell Creative Foundation, a space for artists like me, overlooked, underfunded, underestimated. We launched with grants for public school art teachers, then scholarships for students in low-income communities. I remembered what it felt like to beg for a $500 grant. Now I could change someone's entire life with a check and a single belief you're worth investing in. The first press release included a quiet dedication for the ones who were told they'd never make it, my parents. Just as Rebecca predicted, they swarmed. Suddenly, my mother remembered how she always believed in my creativity. My father called with business ideas he'd love to pitch just casually. I drew the line early. I set up a generous, structured retirement fund for them. But I made it clear no handouts, no deals, no backdoor influence. Treat me like your daughter, I told them, not your ATM. They didn't like it, but over time, they adjusted. With Rebecca, the road was messier, but somehow more honest. She kept her job barely. Mr. Thompson issued a formal reprimand but honored the deposit condition. Her relationship with the staff changed, of course. Whispers followed her. Some resented her. Others pitied her. She asked for a transfer, voluntarily. She moved to a smaller suburban branch, less prestige, less pressure. But as she told me during one of our new weekly dinners, it's the first time in years I've slept through the night. Yes, we have weekly dinners now. Same booth, same restaurant, always low-key. She shows up in jeans now, minimal makeup, sometimes with a joke, sometimes with silence, but never with condescension. One night over mushroom risotto, she looked at me and said I started therapy. I nearly dropped my fork. She smiled. I had to. After what happened, after what I did, and it's hard, she said, but necessary. I nodded quietly, proud. She didn't need my approval, but I gave it anyway. You're doing the work, I told her. That matters. Another time she asked, do you think Grandpa Ted ever regretted not reconciling with Dad? I paused. I think he regretted not being understood. But no, I don't think he regretted leaving the money to someone who would use it to create not control. She looked at me then, not with envy, not with guilt, but with something else. Maybe respect. In that moment, I realized something. Money didn't change me. It just stripped away the noise so I could finally be who I was all along. A creator, a sister, a woman who refused to be defined by anyone else's idea of worth. 6 months passed. Winter melted into spring. The world moved on. My inbox stayed full, but my heart stayed focused. I poured myself into the foundation. Traveled to schools, sat in classrooms, watched kids light up when they realized someone believed in them. That's when I felt richest. Not when the deposit cleared, not when the headlines broke, but when a 6th grader in a South Side classroom held up her painting and said, Miss Mitchell, do you think I'm good enough? And I got to say, you're more than good enough. You're powerful. Because someone once told me that too, and it changed everything. So no, I don't hate Rebecca. She was cruel, yes, competitive, dismissive, but also scared, conditioned. Just like I was overlooked. She was overburdened. We were both trapped, just in different cages. And that day in the bank, that wasn't revenge. That was freedom. Freedom from the roles we'd been assigned since birth. The golden child and the black sheep. The banker and the artist. The beggar and the billionaire. Now we're just Natalie and Rebecca, sisters, still figuring it out, but finally walking side by side. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, your friends, or the world, leave a comment below. Tell me how you rose above. And if this story hit home, hit like, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories of justice, resilience, and the sweetest revenge of all, becoming everything they said you couldn't.